Welcome to the Crossing the Line podcast. I'm your host, Joelle Casteix. Today, we're joined by Dr. Jeffrey Haverland, a professor of teacher education and a member of the NC SESAME Board of Directors. Dr. Haverland's work focuses on a critical but often overlooked question: educator ethics and how we prepare future educators to recognize, prevent, and respond to sexual misconduct in schools. Through his work in teacher preparation programs and national prevention efforts, Dr. Haverland is helping bring prevention directly into the education pipeline, where it can make the greatest difference. We are so happy to have him here. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So, you're a professor of teacher education at the University of Dubuque, but you have a specialty in sexual misconduct prevention. How did you get there?
So honestly, with kind of my path here, I've taught middle school and I've been a principal and I've been a curriculum person. And somewhere along that line, we had two pretty powerful cases come out of our school district of educator misconduct, actually. And for the most part, we've always been taught that it's like teachers, right? They're the ones. And then all of a sudden we have two administrators within a pretty small chunk of time. And that really first started to get me thinking about it. And it was right after that that I started my doctoral work, and I was looking for a project and what I wanted to do. And I really started reading into different, getting into this whole misconduct thing and how prevalent is it and who is committing it and where is it happening and why is it happening. And then it just became more of it became sort of an interest that I wanted to find out more about. I started to come across people and reach out to them to get support and help and try to figure it out. And it was a small group. And I heard back from some key players, and those key players really sort of helped me, especially with like Billy Joe Grant. She really helped me sort of do some research. She would help me with the kind of the process. And then after like all of that, and that was early on, I guess I didn't meet her till later in the process, but then once I was done there and I started working with Sesame, eventually getting onto their executive board, then it became a very personal thing. And so I've always had an interest in ethics, but not the old white guy ethics. And there's nothing, I'm not saying anything against those, but students, especially college students, don't necessarily respond to, let's talk about this old ethical stance. And then ethics became a really interesting conversation of, there is so few things, and we talk about this in class all the time, there are so few things in life that are actual guarantees. The reality is yes, you are born and one day you will die. And inside of all of that, there's a lot of gray. There's a lot of areas where we're trying to figure out, we want a right answer. We want to say yes or no, but the reality is it's challenging and it's difficult. And some of our responses to things open up bigger conversations. And so then it just became pure interest. And I started working with the Iowa Association of Colleges for Teacher Education. We wrote some grants through AACTE, which are our national groups, to start looking at what are ethics in teacher education and in educator prep. And from there, we paired up with Troy Hutchings, and we did work with him on our local level, or on our state level, actually. We finished that grant. We continued our work. We moved into a second grant. We started creating modules to be used by all teacher prep organizations in Iowa on teaching students ethics, but it's actually transitioned a little too. But we have these modules now where people are able to take them, walk into a classroom and start providing some good research-based scenario or dilemma-based things to talk to students about ethics. And so the biggest shift, though, that has happened in the last few years is we started to get away from that black and white, yes, no, right, wrong. We started to think more about those gray areas, and we've started to push more toward risk and being able to assess in a situation what kind of risk or peril you're putting yourself at. And then from there, being able to make more informed decisions using like your code of conduct in your state and maybe the model code of ethics for educators to say, these things are telling me that what I'm about to do isn't good or isn't the best course of action. And the hope is to get them to the point where they can look at something and say, using those tools and those resources to be able to say that, hey, I probably shouldn't go down this road. And I have some defense on why I don't need to. So the long way around that little question you asked me is it is very much, I'm really interested in it. I love education. I have loved every single job I have ever held. And that is not a lie. And does it mean all days were good? No, but I loved them. And in the end, now where I'm at, when I'm preparing students to work in one of the most complex periods of teaching ever, they honestly need to know how to manage decision making and do it in a way that not only protects them, but is hyper aware and protective of their students.
So tell me a little bit more about these actual ethics that you're talking about. What are some of these scenarios? What are some of the subject matter
So
topics that you're
we actually did, prior to somebody at the Board of Educational Examiners in Iowa taking a new job, they actually worked on our team. So this was a big change in how we did our grants. It wasn't just teacher prep people. It was people from our licensure board and people from our teacher union. And we invited administrative organizations too to provide representation. And the idea was, could we find scenarios or dilemmas. Now, and I'll give you kind of the breakdown with that. So a scenario tends to be much longer in my brain. It gives a lot of detail. It's almost like a story, like you would read it out of the newspaper. Where a dilemma, you've got to be careful that you don't add so many contextual details that you like slam dunk the answer. And so it may be something as simple as, a teacher and a student meet for coffee. By itself, that dilemma isn't necessarily bad. Now we start adding age. Now we start adding gender. Now we start adding, going back to age. So not just the age of the student and the teacher, but now we're looking at what is the age of consent if something were to happen. Was this done in school or out of school? Was it done in private or in public? And so by adding these contextual variables, it really starts to get students to think differently. And you can really do this with absolutely anything. And then what it goes into deeper then, and there's a whole protocol I work through with my students that one of the big things I'm always asking them to look at is vantage point. So often we're taught to kind of consider our life in a vacuum, like I'm making a decision. So if I'm helping a student who is having a really difficult time and I am just trying to provide care and provide support so they can find services, in my bubble, I'm doing what's right and what's good and what's just. The person walking by the door who's noticing me having this private conversation, whether it be emotional, heated, etc., whether they have a preconceived notion about me or about somebody else that makes them look at me differently, they have a different vantage point. And it isn't until we start to look at those pieces that we really start to understand why what is happening in my space may not be what's observed in the space of others. And then that opens up huge, really amazing dialogue that you can have. And we're never trying to get a student to be able to justify an unethical, what we would consider to be absolutely black, white, unethical kind of thing. We're never trying to get them to defend their way into that being okay. What we're trying to do is stop them from getting to that place where early on they say, hey, I'm always meeting with this student, always, but I never meet with any other students. And I have inside jokes with this student that I don't have with other students. And so now I, as the adult, have to pull back and create a boundary that I may never have been taught how to create. And we don't do a good job of training boundaries in new teachers and frankly in veteran teachers anyway. And that one's I'm going to speak a little out of my lane on that one because I work with people who want to be teachers, fairly new educators. But we've never really sat down and said, because we tell them, you want to be their coach and their teacher and their friend and their mentor and their counselor and sometimes their healthcare professional. And you're going to do all of these things because you're a good person. And then we put them down that road and all of a sudden they're like, well, I did this and it turned out fine. And I did that and it turned out fine. And again, I'm never justifying an action that takes them to a place, because I already tell my student teachers the way it is. If you went into this career to do something terrible to a kid, they should light your license on fire. You shouldn't even be allowed out. My goal is to help you navigate all of these complex worlds to make sense out of what you're dealing with. Because kids often, even though they know you're a mandatory reporter or whatever you want to call it, they often will tell you things before their brain will engage, right? And so what do you do with that? Because now you're like, I should tell somebody. And then in the other part of your brain, you're like, but they trusted me and it's going to wreck this. And when you're 22, I don't care who you are. There is no, I would literally bet money that there's no 22-year-old out there saying, I hope all my kids hate me and it'll be fine when they don't talk to me. That's not how humans work. And so being able to navigate that goes back sort of into why we look more at these dilemmas where it's not black and white, it's just different. What does your gut tell you? How do you proceed?
This is so interesting because Dr. Billy Joe Grant, who's also on the NC Sesame Board of Directors, and I were having a conversation to prep me for this interview. And I was like, well, so tell me a little about, ethics and so on and so forth. And she started throwing these scenarios and dilemmas at me where there were no good answers. And I was kind of floored. I'm like, oh, wow, because, you know, full disclosure, I'm a certified teacher long, long time ago. That certificate has since expired. But in my teacher education program, we were taught to be overly involved. We were taught to be, you have to be in there and make sure the kids' home life is good and everything else. It was the exact opposite almost of what you're saying now. And so there are a lot of teachers out there. I mean, I'm in my mid 50s who are still teaching who were, educated
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about is truly revolutionary. And I honestly think it's a discipline in and of itself.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the trick. Like I came up in that, so teaching middle school, the things kids would tell you and the way they would act, it was crazy. Like it just blew your mind. Like nobody could ever prepare you for that. You couldn't prepare for what their home lives would be like. You couldn't prepare to even comprehend the abuse and the neglect and all of that. And so, yes, we were all taught in that sort of grouping and, in the 90s and before that it is our job to protect these kids. And we became really good at it, but we started to do it at our own peril. And then we opened the door for people to come in who had bad intent. And that to me is inexcusable. And we can often blame our new teachers, but when you look at the data, it's not all new teachers doing this. And so sometimes it's veteran teachers. And the conversations I've had with people who have had ethics violations too, and like, how did you end up here? And when they explain it, you're like, okay, I don't agree with your eventual outcome, right? But I understand why you took steps in that direction. And all you needed was somebody to slide in and go, hey, I really want you to think about how this looks right now or what message this sends. And maybe they would have gone the other way. And that's what I need my new educators to do, to go out and be able to look at a 20-year veteran and go, listen, this is but it's scary. Like it is scary to say that when you're looking at them and you're like, well, they'll get me fired. I worked this whole time and nobody will like me at my job. And then we got to look at that whole other thing. So I am very much a relationship driven human. Like you can talk to anyone. Connection is my number one core value, right? So in thinking about all of that, I have to figure out a lot of times, how do I navigate that and do what's right for the other people, and those are my students and my kids that I used to teach, and that's become sort of the trick with all of this, because I don't want them to be uncaring and lack compassion and have zero empathy. I just need them to take moments to pause and say, where is this taking me? If I don't have the right information, who can I ask? Who am I looking at to get this information from? Are they the best person to do that for? And so yeah, that caring generation makes a lot of sense. It hits home with me. And then in all of that, now as we still expect that, but we expect very public interactions, and there's a lot of laws in states coming down that make all of teaching so much more difficult. Well, then stop and teach me the boundary. tell me when I am getting too involved. And how do you do that when you're talking to a kid who is like, they're crying, and you're, as a human, you're like, I need to help you. Like, that's my job. I wouldn't have gone into teaching if help wasn't one of my little things that I go to. But in doing that, I just need to know that it's okay for me to help them by saying, I'm going to walk you down to my friend and I'm going to have them talk to you, because I know this is so above me and I can't do it justice. And being okay saying that stuff and building sort of that into how you interact with kids in the first place, I think is really what we've got to move toward.
Well, and it's also the discussion of intent versus impact.
Mhm.
Your intent may be purely innocent, but the impact on
Yes.
that student is completely different.
Yes.
And the impact is how other people see it.
Absolutely. The impact on that student, other people, every other student. And what repercussions does that have? And if, even little things, like not even in terms of like sexual misconduct, but let's say you're the teacher who doesn't call kids on their behavior or their language or things like that. What you're doing is demonizing other teachers who hold students to that line. And now you've created this really strange imbalance where they see you as a savior from all of the other demons out there, and just by trying to build that connection, having no one ever taught you that there is a happy medium. Yes, you can smile before Christmas, but you also have to be very clear and like, this is making me uncomfortable, and I'm okay saying that. And that goes back, we got to do better teaching boundaries and then reteaching them once they're out in the profession. But it's not just it's not just teachers. This goes into administrators, this goes into paraprofessionals, this goes into support staff in general, coaches. You think of these careers that have the most intense contact or communication, coaching, music, even literature, where you are just so tight with students. Emotions are going to bleed. Do you have it in your power to protect yourself from those, that like what those emotions could go to?
This also goes to the importance of, like I said before, policy. So, are you, as a part of this ethics education, are you also working with administrators on how to develop better policies for schools and instilling these boundaries?
So I'm doing it in sort of a roundabout way. I would love to say that I'm working with some group to develop these amazing policies, but I'm also doing some work for the Board of Educational Examiners, where I meet with people who have they've come up against their license. They've had an ethics violation. And my job in meeting with them is really to have them process through this entire thing that happened, like to recall it in their own words, to sort of see where they went wrong in terms of the model code, in terms of the Board of Educational Examiners, in terms of state law or case law, in terms of district policy, and to really understand where their intent was, what they were hoping for, and then getting into this conversation of like unintended consequences. And the reason behind, and my hope with all of this, is the more work I can do in this realm, helping them sort of navigate that. Because here's the thing, people who end up coming to see me as part of their license coming back or being able to get their license back, they literally are telling me just by default that they really do want to work at this. And it's not, none of them have done things that would be like, certainly in Iowa, certain parts of our standard one for ethics, like an inappropriate sexual relationship with a student. I'm never seeing those people, right? I'm seeing the ones who, maybe they had an online relationship of even just friends, like communicating through text or whatever, and it was deemed inappropriate. And now it's my job to help teach them. And actually, I don't even want to say it's teaching. It's my job to help them see what
That's grooming.
went wrong.
It can be criminal.
Yes. And then, okay, so this is why people reacted the way they did. And so when you go back into it, this is how you need to think and process differently. And so my roundabout way then in working with this whole ethics stuff is doing this work and being a part of that process where people can find their way back to teaching. I mean, it's never going away, right? It's never coming off their license. But they can at least find their way back because their intent was never bad intent. It was poor intent that circles them back around, and they never crossed the line that they couldn't come back from. And so, that's the work I do. And then the work I do with the Iowa Association of Colleges of Teacher Education or for teacher education is super important because our hope is to eventually, like, getting these modules done means that we can put them out to the country, that anybody can get these and do work with these, and start helping their pre-service teachers better prepare. And, down the line, would I love it if this could go into districts? I would. That would be amazing. And I've worked with people through NASDAQ on model legislation, and I've done little things like that. I helped plan the PPI conference. So we're always trying to. So I wish I could say I was doing some major policy work, but mine is more fringe work that hopefully will eventually drive policy. And maybe someday I'll get more into that when I'm not doing 25,000 other things. But it is just sort of building that base that not everybody is bad. There are things people can come back from, but it's like everything in life. It's kind of like giving a kid a project or a student a project and not giving them a rubric and then grading them bad, or you being surprised. That's even worse. You being surprised by the project they turn in when you never told them what you expected. You never provided them guardrails. You just said, go. And teaching is the only profession on this planet where quite literally you come off of student teaching and the next thing you do is have a classroom all to yourself. And you are expected to know all of the historical context of everything, all the laws, everything on day one. Or you better have a really good mentor, right? And so, or you need people like me who are always in the back of your head saying, have you thought about this? Did you pause? Did you look at it from another vantage point? So I guess I'll be more of a groundswell. That's what I'm hoping for. I want people to leave here and be comfortable talking and sharing ethics, and to do that with others. But again, moving away from ethics, getting more to that risk and more to that defensible decision making. That's really what I'm hoping for. And our work at the state level, the national level, if we can eventually get this work out to everyone, that's awesome. That means we have done a major part in this, but it's also now like pushing me to this summer to really start thinking about, I think it's time to develop some kind of module for boundaries. Like, what do they really mean? And I had somebody say something to me at a professional conference one time, and he was really well-meaning. He was not trying to be, that person that likes to shoot down your presentation, right? But he's like, you're seriously telling me we need to teach boundaries? Because in your rational brain, you think, okay, yeah, you should know your boundaries. You should know what you can and can't do. But our profession is it's just so wild. Like, it is never scripted. It never works the way that it should. And so if we're not even giving students or people the guardrails, and then we're shocked when they run off the road, that's a failure on the part of preparation. It's a failure on a part of administrators. I mean, that's something that can be impacted. So that's like my next task to play around with,
Well, it makes sense to have this ethics education and training, because let's think about other professions. Lawyers have it.
Yep.
Cops have it. Therapists have it. And they have required continuing education
Yes.
in ethics every year.
Yeah.
And what do they talk about? They talk about professional boundaries. And for attorneys, they talk about all different kinds of things. Why not teachers? They are a profession. They are a graduate level profession. And it makes perfect sense. Doctors have ethics courses. And so I don't think that it is outside of the box to think that teachers, because of the sheer scope of what they're dealing with, should be given the same benefit. And it's not a burden. It really is it's a safety net.
Yes.
Because I'm thinking about, so you were talking about how when the people, the folks who come to you to get their credential back, if they were truly or if they were a predator who wanted to find more victims, they wouldn't be wasting their time with you.
They wouldn't, and they wouldn't even have gotten to me, because it is, because I don't see them until after the entire investigation, until it is a stipulation on their return of their credential. And so they have gone through all of that. And then for me, being able to look at that investigative report, and they actually send it to me. the Attorney General had reached out to me a few years back to do this, but all the contact I have is directly with the person. They reach out to me to start the process, and then and so they'll send me their investigative report. So it gives me a chance to sort of look through it and see do I notice anything that's sort of standing out, that, a red flag of some sort, and that might be something we dig in more on. Because honestly, if I can get a young person who might be in a student teacher, or maybe their first year of teaching or second year of teaching, and they're already sort of in this spot in their life, if I can help correct that, if I can help them find support to correct that thinking and move forward, then maybe they go on to have an amazing career. Maybe they don't, without any intervention, maybe they stay in the classroom like it used to happen. And then all of a sudden, when this is okay, that's okay, and the next thing's okay. And now we're dealing with a violation that cannot be recovered, that like an absolute violation of trust and boundaries and your job as an educator. And so that's where I see the power in this work, that it doesn't dismiss. We never dismiss what they do. One of the main things we talk about is in this paper, I meet with them, and then we do a paper to go along with it. But it's in this paper, I need to explicitly feel that you understand this wasn't just because you got caught. This was because you made a mistake. And I think that's been like the most profound reality of all of this, is hearing people go, I never thought about it this way. And I'm sitting here going, because somebody should have taught you to think about it that way. Like somebody, and I think of one person in particular who was telling me how, they were communicating on social media, or on text, one of the platforms. I just can't remember right now. And but they were saying, but there are other teachers at my school who do the same thing. Why haven't they gotten caught? And we can never understand nor answer that question, because until districts and until even ed prep, until we have very linear, like if you do this, it's done, like, those steps or that process, then we never understand how people got to where they are. However, it goes back to what you and I were talking about before. I think a lot of it is that so many of our veteran teachers were taught that you need to provide care above all else. Well, okay, but when I do that takes me from just being a power balanced teacher with a student to, and I shouldn't even say power balance, because there's always that imbalance, but now I sort of muddy that water up, and it's like, so now I'm coming down to your level to talk about this, and now we've opened up kind of a problem, right? And so I need stopgaps along the way that say, hey, you got to pause. You're moving in a place you shouldn't. Even if everyone else in the room is doing it, it doesn't make it right? Like that's basic, going back to kindergarten kind of things. But we forget that, even in brain development, when you hear how long, it takes till mid to late 20s for good brain development. And if we still have impulsive, and impulsive sounds super negative, and I don't mean to be like that, but if we're still leading or making our decisions based purely on our heart and our emotions, and they are impulsive, and we don't have the experience to tell us when to move forward or when to back off, again, we can't be surprised when people make have these problems in their life, or make these terrible mistakes, these terrible missteps, or it's our job. We've got to do a better job prepping. In our work with Sesame, we are on the other side of it, where it's like we're seeing the absolute fallout. We are seeing the failure of education to prepare people to manage boundaries and to not do harm. And so on my end, my job is hopefully to help stem the workload coming into Sesame or NC SESAME, because that's where I think that's where the rub is. We have to do better on the front end. We have to do better training and holding people accountable and keeping expectations high. I mean, it's even gotten to the point in my teacher ed program where I'm really considering having every teacher ed student going into student teaching apply for a pre-service sub-authorization credential, which immediately lines them up with the ethics of the Board of Educational Examiners. And so even during student teaching, they are held to that ethical responsibility and conduct. And I think I think there's going to need to be more people who are considering things like that, because again, we know that there's a flow going through organizations like ours. We need to somehow stem that. I think we'd be the happiest people on earth if we could just close our shutter, right? Be like, we're done, we're fixed. But it's not happening, and it's not going to happen if we don't have people on the front end making that a priority.
Well, and what it does also is it creates a barrier to entry, so to speak. So if you are a true predator who's going into teaching because you want to target students, are you going to sit through an ethics course?
Oh, and if you're with me, you're not going to sit through 12 hours of it. So, so.
And are you going to, if you let's say your ethics module gets nationwide in the teacher ed programs, are you going to sit through that? No, you're going to be like, you know what? I'm just going to coach Little League, or I'm going to find the easiest way to get access to kids.
Yeah.
Because the last thing that a true predator wants is to be lectured about why they're bad.
Right.
And then they just want easy access.
Yep.
To it. So I think what it'll do also is that any district or teacher ed program that has that, let's say a district adopts it, predators aren't going to want to work in that district because they're going to know that all the other teachers are informed.
Yes.
There's a rubric, there's ethics, there's everything. And so it's like, I'm going to go somewhere else.
Yep.
I think that's amazing. And I mean, what it brings up to me is, if you've ever had to do a living trust will, whatever, where you have to, a DNR, and they give you this grid. And for people who aren't familiar with it, it's a grid, and it has various scenarios on it. And scenario, you've lost one leg, you can't speak, and breathing is minimal. Do you deny food? Do you deny water? This or that? And it's really, it's very intrusive, and it takes you a couple hours to get through it with your spouse. But when you're done, you're like, oh, okay. So if you have both your arms and legs, but you can't speak and you're brain dead, we pull the plug.
Yep.
It's all written down. And I think that kind of grid analysis is almost exactly what you're talking about when it comes to policies. A district can say, this is no, this is no, this is no, and there's no gradation there.
Well, and it's so interesting. I was at this conference, and this person, we were talking about AI, and this person made this comment about how you all hate doing the Title IX trainings, and you're just kind of guessing your way through. And if you could, and I'm sitting there and I'm like dying, because I'm like, I hope that isn't it. But the truth is, training also needs to change, because if something like this becomes a module where I can read it and click, 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 it doesn't sync. There's no conversation. And I think that's one thing I wish, when people are considering training for these or doing trainings around anything in terms of ethics and risk, that it has to be live. It has to be real conversations, and it has to be the purpose of your agenda. It can't be we're going to start with 2 minutes of ethics and then roll out of there. It needs to be, and they need to get in the weeds on this isn't you doing drugs with a student. This isn't you having sexual relationship with a student. This is you crossing a weird boundary, right? And we're going to talk about it. And now I want you to think about, if you did that, what are the potential consequences that could come out of it? The ones that you didn't think of 2 seconds before. Have the people around you talk about, hey, I understand why you chose to do that, but if you did that, do you know it could look like this, or it might send this message? And then that's where you start to get thinking. And so, we as educators, we always talk about metacognition, like we talk about it. But the reality is, being able to get people to think about why they made a decision, and then how they would take what they learned and do something different with it. Like, that's powerful. Being able for them to learn about a dilemma or even a scenario in one perspective, and then be able to apply that to a new context. That's what we all strive for in education. Like, that's the gold standard of learning. And so, like, these trainings have to be more than what unfortunately has become of Title IX training and things like that. And I get why we do it that way, right? We have to do mass offloading of this work. We need people to be aware of it. We need them to be culpable, right? They have to know that even if they didn't watch the video, or if they guessed their way through it, they're still responsible for everything on it. But I think when it comes to stuff dealing with really these kind of issues where it's really personal, really deep with students, when you're really engaged with young people, I think it has to be more of a it has to be way more in person, personal, where you can explore saying, hey, I would handle it this way, and being able to be receptive to somebody saying, but if you did, you got to think about this. Okay, so now I'm thinking about that and what happened. And then it allows them to add this context that I think will make the lessons better overall.
Well, and it also adds something when I was like talking about when Billy Joe Grant was posing these questions to me. The discomfort I got at not being able to have an answer is not something that can be replicated in a module that I'm clicking through.
Yeah.
But and we did it over Zoom, and her looking at me in the camera and saying, "Well, what would you do?" And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are no good answers, and the physical response that you get to that, or that you get from that, actually, like I can still feel it, And what it does is it makes you think more because you're being challenged.
Yes.
And you're being challenged in a way that no one's going to say you're dumb, no one's going to say you're stupid, and no one's going to say you're wrong per se, because there really is no right answer in a lot of these. So I think that, you're really onto something. I mean, when, ethics education for, attorneys and doctors and everyone, it's in person.
Yes. Yeah. And you have to create a culture where, you got to be careful when you deal with ethics. Again, you have the black, white, yes, no. It's very binary, right? When you're looking at codes of conduct, you've also got to be able to be honest with people and say, in this environment, we are going to talk about decisions. And your job is to be able to go back and sort of defend that decision on why you made a choice you did. But you also have to be open to feedback from other people, and other people have to be willing to, at least for this moment, push aside any of their beliefs and say, I'm going to focus on your belief and what you did or the decision that you would make, and that any answer really is okay. Now, I understand there could be some answers where you're like, no, but you got to work through all of those details. And I think when you create that environment and people are talking, and I always love it when by the end, student teachers, like one of my last sessions with them, actually, it'll be in a couple of weeks. They'll bring things from their classrooms or schools that just make them a little. I'm like, I'm not talking about black and white, like you're a kid, a teacher puts her hands on a kid. We're not talking about that. I want you to bring something that just makes your gut a little uncomfortable, that tells you something's amiss. And we're going to talk through that. And then we actually run it through this whole sort of this kind of thing. Is it illegal? Is it against code? Is it against policy? Now in that decision that you made, what are the potential consequences of that decision? What are the consequences you didn't think about? Did you consider that third person vantage point? Now that you're considering that third person vantage point, what do you need to worry about in terms of your decision? Because at the end of the day, in this profession, every person is going to come across a scenario one day that has two terrible possibilities, and you've got to pick one of them. And so in that space, you've got to be able to say very confidently that I am choosing to do this because of it. Now, that does not tell you that you don't have responsibility for those kids in front of you. It's telling you that you are going to have to use everything in your power and all of the resources around you. That's probably the key. The people around you, to be able to say, I've run up against something that I don't understand it. I don't know what to do. I'm doing my best, but I'm failing. Can you help me? And I think that has been the piece I think that's been missing in education for so long, that sometimes people are so afraid of looking inept or unable to do something that they don't ask a question that not only could protect them, save their career, but it protects kids. And if you really got into this job for the right reason, you didn't get into it to teach middle school. I didn't get into it to teach middle school biology, right? I love science, is my favorite, right? But that wasn't my end goal. My end goal was to have sort of this lasting impact on humans. And did I always do it right? Nope. Did I probably make mistakes? Almost guaranteed. But I had the right people around me. I knew how to ask the questions. And it's probably why I ended up where I am now, asking the questions that I am, because I was brought up in this kind of environment that it was okay to mess up, but you had to take responsibility for it. You had to be accountable. I mean, we have accountability and we have responsibility, and we need to understand why they're similar and why they're different, and just giving people that opportunity to realize that you're part of a bigger system, right? You're accountable to different groups of people, and because of that, it's complex. And that, I think that's really what sort of pushed me to where I am today in looking at ethics and risk differently.
So are programs like yours in other schools out there, or are we just seeing that Dubuque?
No, so they're definitely, like, I actually partner with area schools that I've invited them. They come over and go through our sessions with us. But now, like, we just got back from the Colleges of Teacher Ed conference in Iowa, where we rolled out the our first module. So we now have 3 modules out there that we're having people implement and then provide feedback on. But in theory now, we are available to every teacher prep or ed prep organization in Iowa, including community colleges, which I'm going to get this number wrong, but it's in the 30s. It's around. So, okay. So now we have potentially reached a huge, not huge, I'm getting excited, a large amount of people. And when we finally feel like these modules have the ability to kind of go to other states, then we're going to just share it out. Because we want people to do it. And I really would love school, like, administrators to pick it up and say, all right, what could we do using this module as a starting point? Like, that was always our goal. Our goal wasn't to make money or to get, like, notoriety. Our goal is to, and this whole group that's been working together on this for years now, the goal is just to do better by our students, because ultimately then they do better by their students. And that's our job. Like, that is our job. And so someday, sooner than later, it will be available to anybody who wants it. We're just working out the kinks right now.
Yeah, I bet that there are districts and teacher education programs across the country who are listening to this going, we don't have the resources to develop this kind of program. We don't have the time. We don't have the people. We don't have the money. Oh my God, when is it going to be available? Because we have every district has problems with poor decision making.
Yeah.
And every district has problems with teachers who make really bad decisions and horrible mistakes. And how do you make sure that, you mitigate that before?
Yes.
So tell me, how do your students like the ethics curriculum?
So I feel like there are points where I'm like, they look at me and they're like, oh, he's going on about ethics again, right? But it's okay, because like, when I tell you I believe in this and I value this, when I tell you I believe in the work that Sesame does and I value it, and, like, for me, that sort of brings passion with it. So I'm pretty good at selling it, because I'm really, and excited's not the right word, but I'm so empowered by it. And I literally look at my students and I think, if any of this sticks in your brain, and one day this keeps you from crossing a line and hurting a kid, or wrecking your career, then this was worth every ounce of the work that's gone in. And it has been a lot. There are so many hours of work by, people on the outside, and then the work that I've done here. And so they respond. By the end, they really start to see it. I think by the time student teaching comes around, they really get it. And when we start having them take the lessons, like take what they've learned at their school and bring it back and talk about it in their own context, and they start to see it become authentic, then it really digs in. But I've had people say to me, like, even if they don't like, they get tired of hearing about it, they're like, you're just so excited about it, we pay attention, right? And so, good, fine. If I can get them to pay attention because I'm excited about it. But yeah, not everybody's thrilled with it, right? Not, when I was a teacher, when I first started teaching, when you first started teaching, none of us would go in and say, we're going to do bad things, we're going to break rules, we're going to be unethical. Like, that wasn't who we were by that time, right? And so it's hard sometimes when you have these conversations with 22-year-olds who, however they got to that point, they're like, well, I'm never going to do that. And you're right. You're never going to do it right now in your brain. But someday when you're tired, and someday when you meet up with the 10,000th decision of the week, and you're exhausted and you have no more capability to think and to function in real time, you might make a mistake. And you need to be able to recognize that mistake in a way, or that misstep in a way that you can backtrack. Like you can pause and go, that wasn't right. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to fix that, or I'm going to do something about it. And that, so I can't, even if they look at me and they're like, this will never happen to me, I get where they're coming from, because it was never going to happen to any of us, right? I hope not. Like, and I know that's really naive. Maybe there are people out there who got into this profession for the absolute wrong reason. And I hope I hope I never find out the answer to that. My hope is that along the way, they've made bad decisions and they continued to make them, and nobody intervened and nobody provided guardrails. And then eventually they made a decision that they did harm. And then at that point, I'm done. Like for me, like I will help you up until the point where I know you haven't made a conscious decision to be a terrible human being. And then that's when I think we'll call it pettiness, is going to kick in a little bit, right? And so there's so much good work that we can do on the front end.
But as you know, teaches a lot more than content.
Yes.
So if you're passionate about it, it makes it sweet. So if you could, as we're going to wrap this up, if you could say something to new teachers who are listening to this, to old teachers who are listening to this, to administrators, what would you want to tell them about ethics in education?
Oh, that's a lot of groups. So I think the biggest thing for teachers, new teachers, veteran teachers, is that even the best of us will someday make a decision that other people could consider to maybe be to go against what our conduct, our ethics, whatever. We always have to be willing in this world. And I used to talk to my student, I don't say it as much anymore, but this idea of you've got to learn to be able to fall on your sword. You have to know when you've crossed the line, or even toed up against the line to where it kind of scared you a little bit, made you uncomfortable. And you need to be willing to say to yourself that you will not always have the right answers. And even the best teachers out there, in all of their best intent, will make poor decisions. You deliver bad lessons. You say something you shouldn't have said. You act in a way that was counter to how you feel. And I think that's a very human quality that I think our the students we teach need to see. But we also need to understand that we have a responsibility in this profession. And whether or not we are considered professionals, by any other definition, we are a licensed profession. We are entrusted with kids. I don't know of any more amazing sort of thing to be entrusted with. And then in that process, when we get to a point where we are not diligent, where we are not really thinking about the actions that we're doing, or the things that we're saying, or we're not open to the fact that we don't know everything. If we ever get to that point and we don't have it within us to step back and say, all right, I need a new perspective, or I need to revisit it. To me, that's always been something I've told my student teachers. That's when it's time to probably leave this profession. When you think you are so good and so perfect and nothing could ever go wrong in your career, you got to be really careful getting to that point. And yes, I'll be the first to tell you, I think relationships. So the most important thing when I tell students, student achievement, you got to teach students, right? You do that. For me, I do that by building deep relationships. But I also understand in building relationships that I absolutely must adhere to boundaries. I think for administrators out there, we have to start telling people what we expect from their behavior. We have to start not saying, well, they meant well, because we go back to that, your meaning, your intent in the outcome, right? Like, we have to be willing to challenge people to say, hey, when you said that, did you see how that kid felt, or how they acted? Or do you see if you did it a different way, maybe? And I think we need to have those conversations. And especially, having been a principal, sometimes you walk into a classroom and everybody's on guard. But if you can build a relationship where they're not on guard, where they're always sort of open to that conversation, you don't fear them, they don't necessarily fear you, because that is never a good way to run anything, right? And so, but being open to those conversations is huge, and not assuming. It's like assuming that every 16-year-old knows how to run every piece of technology on the planet, right? They don't. And so we are going to have to teach them how to do things. We're going to have to teach them procedures. We're going to have to show them policy. We can't make assumptions about them. And then on the back end of it, when people cross a line and do harm to students, yeah, it's time to go. Like there is no excuse for especially for premeditated harm caused to a student. There is no way to understand the lifelong repercussions of that. There's no way to fix it. No amount of money. And if nothing else, like let's look at the money end of it. The amount of money that it is costing districts to deal with teachers on the back end of a serious ethical violation should be enough to compel them to train differently on the front end. But this can't just be about like, oh, I got this program and we're going to do it because the district makes me. No, we're going to do it because it matters. Because every day when I look at that kindergartner walking through my door, I need to know that that little girl is safe, that she feels comfortable, that she has the ability to sort of learn in a way that isn't threatening, and that people aren't like here with intent to do harm to her. And I don't know, like I could tell them 10 million things because I feel like I'm on my soapbox right now, but God, I love this profession. And it kills me when so many of us get reduced to that least common denominator of someone who does bad and then we all do bad. When in fact, I'm out here doing my best and I'm trying to help others do their best. And so it's a complex career and we need people all along the way, not just early in our careers with mentoring support. We need people all throughout the way to say, hey, let's just go back and let's check ourselves right now. Let's see what we think about this. Let's talk about possible decisions and things that could happen, how you might respond and what might come of that. And by having those conversations, I think you create a better environment overall. Nobody feels like my students don't feel bad when they come to me and they say, hey, I'm concerned about this, because I'm going to work through it with them. I'm not going to be like, well, that was a terrible decision.
This is great. So, Jeff, if someone wants to find you, what's the best way to do that?
Email is always the best way. I'm at jhaverland@dbq.edu. I work at the University of Dubuque, as I said at the onset. And so you can always reach out to me that way. I love to talk ethics. I'd love to walk through things with you, but we're probably going to talk more about risk and decision making than ethics. So yeah, I would love for people to be interested and want to talk about this, because at the end, of the day, at the end of my career, all you do is you hope you leave stuff better than when you found it. And if this gets people doing a better job of protecting children down the line and protecting themselves down the line, then yeah, I'll have a conversation with you any time of day.
Thank you so much for being here today. I'll make sure to put all your contact information.
All right. All right. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, and so thank you for joining us in this conversation with Dr. Jeff Haverland, a professor of teacher education and NC SESAME board member whose work focuses on integrating sexual misconduct prevention and response into the preparation of future educators. If you'd like to learn more about NC SESAME, visit ncsesame.org. You can also follow us on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, and a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts will help us to be seen by more people. I'm your host, Joelle Casteix, and thank you so much for listening.